Down where the stone runs warm and the air tastes like oil, something is waiting. Tonight, we follow the black flame through the basin, slow and quiet, until the tunnels go dark again. Deep in the Oilwell Basin, in caverns that sweat heat and breathe fumes, an enormous cephalopod moves through stone the way other creatures move through water. To the people of Azuz, it is not a rumor, it is memory. A long-absent presence carried through oral tradition more reliably than through neat guild records, until the basin finally offered it up again. They call it the Black Flame. And in this case, that name is not poetry. It is a description. New Udra coats itself in a tar-like secretion, then ignites it, producing a heavy fire that burns dark, clings, spreads, and lingers. In open air, that would be terrifying. In confined tunnels, it becomes something worse. If we want to understand New Udra with any clarity, we can't treat the basin like scenery. The Oilwell Basin is a cavernous, volcanic ecosystem where oil wells up from the ground and gathers into deep pools of oily silt. Vast caves open into tar pits and oil lakes. Thermal vents breathe smoke and other gases into chambers that already feel too warm to trust. It also moves through the same broad rhythm the forbidden lands are known for. A tightening fallow, a dangerous inclemency, and then a returning plenty. In the basin, that cycle feels especially physical. During the plenty, the locale reads almost like it's exhaled. With the worst of the burning past, cooler pools can collect through the lower sections, and the deeper caverns can take on a calmer, bluish cast, less like a forge, more like a drowned world lit from far away. It's a brief window where the basin feels, if not safe, then at least navigable. During the fallow, the ground becomes a different kind of problem. Thick oil silt spreads and clings, turning footing into drag and making every route feel slower than it should. It's also the kind of terrain that rewards ambush and tricks. Rompopolo, for example, is documented using oil gases, turning what the basin provides into something it can weaponize. And then the fire spring arrives. The basin's inclemency, where intense fires rage and oil pools ignite, pushing the entire ecosystem toward heat and hazard. When it happens, even the village of Azuz can feel the pressure, with records describing packs of Ajarakan threatening the settlement during inclemency conditions. In a place like this, a predator adapted not just to survive heat and fuel, but to treat them as tools, feels less like an anomaly. It feels like the basin's most natural conclusion. New Udra's basic form follows cephalopod principles, but magnified to an unsettling scale and shaped for subterranean life. Beneath its coating, it is described as vivid green and blue, transitioning to yellow at the ends of its tentacles and the horn structures. Deep grey striping breaks up the underlying pigmentation. In daylight, those colours would be striking, but New Udra is rarely seen uncoated, and it prefers poorly lit habitat. So the coloration likely isn't camouflage in the usual sense. It may be an internal signal layer, something meant to be seen only during certain states: mating, territorial display, juvenile interaction. Or it may simply be a retained trait, never strongly selected against, because the oil coat hides it almost completely in practice. The hide itself is notable for two reasons. It is highly elastic, and it is resistant to fire. Elasticity in an enormous subterranean animal is not a minor advantage. It is foundational. It allows new Udra to treat the basin's topology as a medium, not an obstacle. Fire resistance, similarly, isn't just defense. It permits new Udra to occupy lower strata that would scald or cook most creatures, turning the deepest, hottest channels into viable territory. A predator that can live where others can't gains more than safety. It gains mobility. It gains roots. It gains choices. New Udra is soft and effectively boneless, aside from hardened structures like its serrated beak and the spikes lining its tentacles. That softness isn't weakness. In tight environments, rigidity is often a liability. New Udra can compress through narrow tunnels and crevices that would be impassable to large, rigid-bodied monsters. It can travel between strata quickly, without predictable routes. Hunters often assume that mass means limited access. New Udra contradicts that instinct. It doesn't force itself through the rock like a beast. It flows through it like muscular fluid, redistributing volume through controlled contraction and expansion. From a biomechanical standpoint, the most plausible model is a combination of mantle compression and anchor-based traction. The tentacles grip the tunnel walls, likely using both muscular suction and the mechanical bite of their spikes. The mantle compresses, pushing body mass forward through the opening. The forward tentacles anchor again, and the rear follows in waves. If the oil coating acts as a lubricant, friction drops, abrasion is minimized, and the squeeze becomes sustainable over long distances. This is how an enormous animal moves through crevasse systems without shredding itself on stone. To an observer in open space, the movement would look sudden and implausible, because the observer assumes New Udra maintains a static body shape. New Udra doesn't. It maintains functional continuity. New Udra has 8 tentacles. 6 are large and used for locomotion and offense. 2 smaller ones near the mouth conceal the beak like an upper lip. That concealment matters. It reduces telegraphing. The bite is less obvious until the creature has already restrained its prey. The 6 primary tentacles are lined with rows of twisted spikes, with the largest concentrated along the underside. That suggests their primary role isn't clean puncture, it's tearing. The twist pattern implies rotational ripping, designed to pull away chunks rather than stab neatly through. In practical terms, it's an adaptation for thick hide, armored scales, and prey that would otherwise require prolonged struggle. The tentacles are reported to be strong enough to restrain and lift large monsters without visible exertion. They can drag new Udra's enormous body across the basin floor, repositioning it around an opponent. And that point is important. New Udra does not need to move as one committed unit. Its limbs let it shift its center of mass while maintaining contact and control. In close quarters, that makes disengaging unusually difficult. At the ends of 3 of the largest tentacle pairs are structures referred to as oculi, believed to function as sensory organs. The distinction matters because New Udra's true eyes sit at the base of its horns. They are described with a long, thin, oblong pupil inclined upward toward the horn tip. Life in the depths has atrophied its vision. It is described as immune to flashes of light. That detail is meaningful in ecological terms. It implies New Udra does not rely on sight as a primary targeting system. In tunnels filled with heat, shimmer, smoke, and oil vapor, vision becomes unreliable. A predator that thrives there would benefit more from vibration detection, heat sensing, chemical gradient sampling, and pressure changes in air currents. The oculi may act as distributed sensory nodes for exactly that, allowing New Udra to feel intruders around corners or through thin rock where vibration and sound transmit better than light. This sensory model matches its resting behavior. New Udra often adopts a posture with most or all tentacles raised. In a calmer interpretation, that isn't only intimidation, it is sampling. A field of limbs held out into the air and along the stone, reading the environment like a net. When sleeping, it prefers tight cavern pits, blocking nearly all access to its den, and it will poke one tentacle out like a probe, sensing incoming intruders at the choke point. That suggests a predator that treats early detection as the foundation of defense, and a predator that treats its den as a trap, a narrow approach that prevents enemies from surrounding it while letting it respond instantly to anything that enters. The single most defining feature of New Udra is its oil mucus coating. It coats itself in a tar-like substance excreted from siphons beneath its mantle. This coating appears to be composed of a fluid naturally produced within its body, combined with crude oil acquired from the surrounding environment. The mechanism resembles cephalopod defensive secretions, or ink, but adapted for terrestrial, subterranean conditions where crude oil is abundant and chemically useful. The most reasonable model is that New Udra produces a base mucosal secretion internally, protein-rich, viscous, originally suited for lubrication and protection against abrasion. As it moves through oil-saturated tunnels, that secretion binds with crude seepage, forming a composite coating with distinct properties. In that composite state, the coating lubricates. It buffers heat, it insulates chemically, and it becomes a fuel reservoir. The coating solves multiple problems at once. Lubrication allows squeezing through rock without catastrophic tissue damage. Thermal buffering slows heat transfer, protecting soft tissues in high-temperature strata. Chemical insulation protects against mineral dust and corrosive vapors. And offensively, it becomes stored resource, something that can be ignited and distributed. This multi-function trait is one reason New Udra feels unusually complete in ecological design. Every part of the adaptation supports more than one survival function, and the environment provides replenishment. In the basin, fuel is not scarce, so the coat is not a limited defense. It is renewable ammunition. New Udra can ignite the fluid it produces. This allows it to emit deluges of fire toward enemies by pumping flaming substance from its siphon. It can engulf itself in flame when enraged, and it can throw globs of explosive oil mucus with its tentacles. The fire is described as exceptionally hot and long-burning, hot enough to scorch other denizens of the igneous depths, while New Udra remains insulated by its hide. This is the basis for the title, Black Flame, because burning oil produces heavy smoke and dark fire, visually distinct from ordinary torch flame. In tunnels, the effect isn't just damage, it's control. Smoke reduces visibility. Burning oil denies terrain, turning surfaces into persistent hazards. And when prey panics in a confined corridor, it becomes predictable. Mechanistically, ignition is where guild reports shift from certainty into hypothesis. Cephalopods don't have obvious fire organs, but two plausible mechanisms can be proposed without breaking the Monster Hunter tone. One is catalytic ignition. Enzymes or reactive compounds introduced at the siphon interact with the oil mucus, generating heat rapidly and igniting volatile components as the fluid is expelled. The other is a mineral spark mechanism. A hardened structure near the siphon opening compresses or strikes in a way that generates a spark, flint-like, plausible in a mineral-rich environment where keratin-like structures could incorporate abrasive particulates. Either way, the outcome is the same. New Udra expels burning fuel, not just heat, and that means it can turn the environment into a prolonged hostile state. When enraged, New Udra shows a consistent signal. Its sensory organs, eyes, and horn structures emit a bright sky blue glow that conceals the pupil and underlying skin coloration. In arch-tempered specimens, the glow is described as deep purple. This bioluminescence is best treated as functional, not decorative. In subterranean ecology, emitted light commonly serves threat display, coordination, or predation manipulation. New Udra's glow may be a warning display, deterring rivals and intruders in tight spaces where retreat options are limited. It may also assist coordination, internal feedback across the body regarding limb placement and mantle orientation, valuable in darkness where external visual cues are absent. A third possibility is that the glow corresponds to chemical states associated with ignition readiness. a visible indicator of internal reactions preceding or accompanying the production of burn-capable oil mucus. And there is also the simplest advantage. In smoke and oil haze, bright blue light scatters. It blurs edges. It makes depth judgment unreliable. In a fight defined by timing and distance, that matters. Behaviorally, new Udra is highly aggressive towards intruders within its territory, while seldom venturing outside it. It also helps to remember that the Oilwell Basin is not empty. Even when you can't see another monster, you can often feel the marks of something else having been there first. Heat holds fingerprints. Oil keeps them. A scuffed trail through oily silt. A line where water has been churned cloudy. A smear on stone where something heavy leaned its weight and then moved on. In a surface ecosystem, competition is often spread wide. In a cavern ecosystem, it's narrow and immediate, because the basin doesn't offer infinite routes. It offers corridors, choke points, passages that only stay passable as long as something else hasn't decided to claim them. And in that kind of world, the monsters that matter most aren't only the ones at the very top. They're the ones that consistently occupy space. A Jarakan is one of those pressures. In a place already defined by heat, it moves like heat-given limbs, appearing in the season when the basin is at its most unforgiving. It doesn't need to compete with the black flame by matching its methods. It competes by making the upper layers feel unsafe, by putting muscle and momentum into tunnels that other creatures would rather use as escape routes. When Ajarakan is active, it changes the simple math of travel. It forces detours. It makes certain corridors expensive. And in a subterranean environment, expensive doesn't mean inconvenient. It means deadly. Gravios is another pressure, but of a different kind. Where Ajarakan is motion, Gravios is mass. A moving wall, a creature that turns tight spaces into barricades just by choosing to be there. In open terrain, you can go around something huge. In a tunnel, sometimes you can't. Sometimes, a single body becomes the landscape. So even if Gravios and New Udra are not chasing the same prey at the same moment, the competition still exists, because they compete for geometry, for the right to make a passage unusable for anything else, for access to chambers where heat vents instead of pooling, for the comfort of a route that doesn't require squeezing through knife-thin stone. And then there is Rompopolo, which is perhaps the most revealing comparison, not because it rivals New Udra in raw power, but because it proves the same lesson the basin teaches again and again, that here the environment is not background, it is the weapon. Rompopolo doesn't merely tolerate oil silt, it interacts with it, using gas and terrain in ways that turn the ground itself into an active hazard. That means Rompopolo isn't competing with New Udra by fighting it head-on. It's competing by claiming the same kind of advantage, control over the space. People assume is neutral. A basin that can be weaponized by one monster can be weaponized by another. And that's important because it means New Udra doesn't live in a vacuum. Its method exists in an ecosystem where method is a common language. Even the quieter predators complicate the picture. A creature like Nasilla doesn't have to dominate the basin to matter. It only has to appear in the right corridor at the wrong time, turning a safe retreat into a trap. And in a place where sight is unreliable and the air is often thick, ambush doesn't require much. It requires patience. And the basin, with all its tight stone and interrupted lines of sight, is built to reward patience. All of this adds up to a simple truth. New Udra's territorial aggression isn't just about hunger, it's about keeping the basin legible. Because if you are a predator that relies on controlling tunnels, controlling choke points, controlling visibility and footing and panic, then other large bodies in your corridors are not merely rivals. They are interference. They are variables. They are the difference between a clean kill and a waste of fuel. So when New Udra treats intruders as disruptions to be removed, that reads less like temperament and more like maintenance. In the Oilwell Basin, control is survival, and the apex that can deny corridors with smoke and flame doesn't only win fights, it decides which routes are usable at all. That combination explains the long gap between sightings, despite persistent stories. A creature can be locally catastrophic without being frequently encountered if it remains mostly subterranean and surfaces under specific seasonal conditions. New Udra is noted to primarily hunt during fire spring, the inclemency of the Oilwell Basin. That timing makes sense. Fire spring increases ambient heat and likely increases accessible ignitable material and vapor conditions. It enhances New Udra's strengths while impairing the comfort and mobility of other monsters. New Udra is also described as attracted to sources of heat and fire, becoming more aggressive in their presence as if consuming them for strength. Interpreted conservatively, this does not require literal feeding on fire. It can be understood as metabolic stimulation. Heat accelerates chemical reactions, increases muscle performance, improves fluid flow, and intensifies the conditions under which oil mucus ignition is easiest. In that interpretation, heat is an amplifier, and New Udra becomes more aggressive because it is operating closer to peak capability. New Udra is also described as fairly intelligent, and its tactics support that. Rather than prolonged pursuit, it relies on restraint and control. It restrains prey with tentacles, gouges with spikes, then burns point blank with flames from the siphon. In confined spaces, this is efficient. Restraint prevents escape. Gouging induces shock and pain, making resistance less coordinated. Then the siphon-delivered burn becomes decisive. Thrown explosive oil mucus globs extend that control into mid-range, punishing distance forcing movement patterns that align prey with tentacle arcs. And if conditions shift unfavorably, new Udra can retreat through narrow crevices and reposition. Rigid-bodied opponents can't follow, so it can re-enter the encounter space from unexpected angles. New Udra has never been observed feeding directly in the wild. That remains a notable gap. However, it has been observed excreting waste products from its siphon, leaving behind a small pool of oil mucus and undigested bones. That implies feeding occurs deeper in the basin, beyond observation, or during concealed periods. The presence of undigested bones suggests digestion that extracts soft tissue and marrow while leaving dense mineral matter relatively intact. And the residue itself likely alters microhabitats, hydrocarbons and bone fragments together, deterring some species, attracting scavengers adapted to the basin's chemical ecology. In a place where fuel and heat are already constants, even waste becomes an ecological tool. To understand New Udra's broader impact, it helps to think of it as a fire-driven apex organism. Many predators shape their ecosystems through direct predation. New Udra also shapes its ecosystem through habitat denial and chemical transformation. Burning oil changes where creatures can safely move. Confined tunnels become lethal choke points if coated in ignited residue. Scavengers delay their approach until heat and smoke dissipate, creating booms tied to fire spring activity. Smaller predators may exploit the edges of New Udra's active zone, feeding on displaced prey or delayed carcasses. Prey species may alter routes in the basin's upper strata to avoid hotspots associated with New Udra activity. And because New Udra can traverse between strata through tunnel networks, simply going deeper is not reliable refuge. Its mobility denies simple vertical escape. There is also a subtler effect. A territorial subterranean monster can regulate movement through tunnel systems that would otherwise serve as shared corridors. If New Udra's presence makes particular networks risky, it partitions the basin into zones with different species compositions and movement rates. It becomes a structural force, not just a predator, a boundary, a living rule written into the geography. New Udra's life cycle remains incomplete in our records, but several points are established. It creates egg sacs within its nest during fire spring. Young New Udra, called New Yaya, hatch en masse at night during a seasonal period referred to as the plenty. Despite the number of hatchlings, fully mature New Udra are seldom seen. That implies very high juvenile mortality. In harsh environments, high reproductive output often offsets severe attrition. The basin's hazards, predation, tunnel instability, and even the danger of living near a territorially aggressive adult could all contribute to low survival. Juvenile dispersal may be especially risky, forcing the young into hazardous tunnels where only a small fraction can establish safe niches. The details of maturation and territorial acquisition remain unknown, but the scarcity of adults suggests maturity is rare and therefore consequential. New Udra's relationship with Azus is one of the clearest intersections between ecology and culture in this case. It was responsible for an incident involving the Everforge during a past fire spring. After that, it became known as the Black Flame. Stories persisted even when the monster wasn't seen again for many decades. That persistence suggests the incident was not minor. It was disruptive enough to become generational reference. The Everforge, as a concentration of industrial heat and flame, would plausibly act as exactly the kind of stimulus source New Udra is drawn to. If heat and fire amplify its aggression, then an Everforge at peak activity during fire spring is not just a settlement feature. It is a beacon. The cultural lesson embedded in the Black Flame story is straightforward. The basin contains forces that interpret heat not as human craft, but as ecological signal. And those forces may respond with predatory intensity. In final assessment, New Udra should not be treated as a demonized exception or a myth wearing biology. It is better understood as a keystone apex organism perfectly adapted to a volatile environment. Its soft body is not weakness. It is mobility and survivability in fractured subterranean terrain. Its oil mucus is not mere defense. It is lubrication, insulation, fuel storage, and offensive projection integrated into one renewable system. Its bioluminescence is likely tied to threat display, coordination, and chemical state changes associated with ignition. Its behavior is consistent with territorial intelligence. It restricts access to its den, probes the environment while resting, exploits restraint and close-range burning tactics, and leverages tunnel networks for repositioning. Its impact extends beyond kills. It shapes routes, partitions habitat, and changes what parts of the basin are viable, especially during fire spring, when the environment becomes most conducive to its strengths, and its cultural impact on Azus, preserved through the Everforge incident and the enduring Black Flame title, is exactly what you would expect from a predator that turns native fuel into directed catastrophe. The Oilwell Basin encourages organisms that treat heat and fuel as ordinary conditions. New Udra goes further. It treats them as tools. It does not merely inhabit the basin's danger. It organizes that danger into a method, and in a place where ignition is always possible, the most successful predator may be the one that learns to carry the spark inside itself. Now let that spark stay down there, sealed behind stone and distance. Good night, hunter.